Great colleagues, I guess we can start. Good afternoon or good morning to everyone. On behalf of the Evaluating Capacity Development UNEG Interest Group, I'm pleased to welcome you all to our today virtual EPE session. Today's presenters will be Katinka Koch from UNITA, Shuma Baija, if my pronunciation is correct, and Lude Julie from UN Women, myself, Lavinia Monforte from FAO. Well, we have so much to share today in a limited amount of time. We therefore decided to accompany you through the journey that we made so far. So after the warm-up session with Katinka, Chuma and Lou will introduce those widely recognized key models to evaluate capacity development that we came across during our researches. Katinka and I will then present you takeaways from the piloting of the capacity development framework, which we will officially launch today. We will then have a Q&A session when we hope you guys could also share your experience so that we can all enrich our knowledge. Without further ado, I will leave you with the amazing Katinka and enjoy today's session. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, amazing Lavinia, and welcome everyone to this session. Just to highlight as well that we, despite not being able to meet in person, of course, at the normal EPE, we would like this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to use any chat comments or questions, any reactions, and please also keep your questions and experience sharing for later. Just to warm up and have you participate, we have prepared a quick poll to also hear from you before we will tell you more about our group's work. Let me start now with the first poll, which is basically there to test the functionality. And it's telling me failed to launch polling error. So Thomas, I think I need your help here. Thank you. So you can now see the first question, which is asking you, where are you joining from today? So while we see the results coming in, please all participate and make use of this trial of the polling function, because before we come to more serious questions about evaluating capacity development. We'll give you some more seconds. Okay. You should now be able to see the results. So we see actually that the great majority of all of us is joining today from home. There are very few, precisely 3 or 7% who are joining from the office. And then there are some people who are from elsewhere, joining from elsewhere. Please feel free to write in the chat box. We are all curious and what nice locations you may be that are not home or office. Okay, let us now move to the more serious poll. So there's a series of questions that is related to your experience in evaluating capacity development, simply for us to know what is actually your experience and also what areas you might identify as challenges. So you see the first question is just asking you, have you already undertaken an evaluation of a project, policy, cluster, or any other evaluation subject that included capacity development? Please feel free to answer. Now, depending if you join from a computer or from a mobile phone, you might need to either scroll down to see the other questions or to the left and right on your phone, I think. We are also asking you regarding the dimensions that you usually look at when you evaluate capacity development. Do you look at the individual level, institutional, or organizational levels, the enabling environment, or even at interconnections? Then the third question focuses on the Kirkpatrick model about which you will hear soon more from Lou, who's going to present the model in more detail. The fourth question focuses on Bloom's taxonomy, which is a concept known in instructional design with regards to learning objectives and the different domains of learning objectives. The fifth question focuses on evaluation stakeholders. And of course, this is a non-exhaustive list, so please use the chat box in case you would like to specify additional possible stakeholder groups. And then the last and sixth question focuses on challenges that you, and I think us as well, we face when evaluating capacity development. Here again, please feel free to share in the chat box what other challenges you might have faced. While responses are coming in, we will give you a little bit more time for those who have not yet read all questions before we look at the answers together. "25 of you voted already. "30 of you voted already. That's great. Thank you for participating. And I fear we have a lot of experts here, but that is great. If you all have experience in evaluating capacity development, we would be really curious to hear more from you as well today. Okay, maybe we can show the results of the poll. So you should now be able to see the results also on your screen. As you can see, 84% of you have actually experience in evaluating capacity development. So we count on you today as well. So share your experience and your lessons and maybe your good practices as well. There are a few of you who have not yet undertaken any evaluation in that area. But maybe you're just curious or maybe you just have an evaluation that is coming and you would like to learn more. Please feel free to let us know more, in the chat box. With regards to question 2 and the dimensions that you usually look at when you evaluate capacity development, I see that the majority looks at the institutional and organizational level, and that's great because we do sometimes face challenges when you have to connect the individual level to the institutional level. But I see almost equally, an equal number also looks at individual level and enabling environment and interconnections between all of those levels. Lavinia will tell you more when she will tell you more about the framework to evaluate capacity development, which also looks at the different levels. Then on question 3, with regards to the Kirkpatrick model, so Lou will explain shortly to you the different levels. Level 3 is actually the level that focuses on the application of knowledge and skills, while level 2 focuses on learning and acquisition of knowledge and skills. But Lou will come back more in detail to the model in a few instances. The Bloom's taxonomy, which divides learning objectives into different domains, actually uses all of those that are mentioned. And from the answers, we can see that most of you are familiar with the cognitive one, knowledge and intellect, while a little bit less familiar with the values and perceptions and the kind of attitudes, and a little bit less with skills levels. And I see some of you selected others, so please feel free to add in the chat box. We would be curious to hear from you. Then regarding possible stakeholders, most of you have selected the direct training participants, which was the answer I expected, but then you also selected the other stakeholder groups, such as supervisors, third persons, such as indirect beneficiaries, trainers, a lot of you, and general public, and then again other. So please, we're waiting for the chat box messages. And then finally, and this will be, I think, a good part of our discussion today, the challenges that you are facing when evaluating capacity development. So the lack of baseline, this is a common challenge, probably not only in the area of capacity development, but overall, but particularly here when you don't know with what you can compare. Obviously, it is very challenging to evaluate capacity development. The lack of needs assessment, and I'm grateful that Chuma will today talk about needs assessment in more detail as well. So we look forward to his presentation on this. But then you also indicate that it's difficult to measure long-term results and impact, particularly when it's about capacity development, and that there is a lack of different types of data overall that makes it challenging to evaluate. With this quick summary of the results of the poll, I would like to hand back to Lavinia, who will then hand over for the first presentation. Thank you, Thomas, for your help with the polls. And please feel free indeed to write in the chat box if you have any questions, but also comments or reactions that you would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Katinka. I would now welcome Lou and Chuma to present on the main methods that we came across during our researches. So over to you, Lou. Thank you.
Good day, colleagues. So thank you, Lavinia. As she just mentioned, I'm going to quickly go through some of the theory that we've come across concerning the ways to evaluate capacity development interventions. You will see that this is a field that has mainly been developed within the private sector, especially with reference to industrial development. And as Lavinia and Katinka will further evaluate later on, this has since been slightly adapted to fit different sectors of work, such as our sector and the work of the United Nations. I'm just gonna start my presentation at this point, and I hope you can see it now, or not yet. And I'm also gonna stop my video, and sorry, can you see this? Yes, okay. So I'm going to be going through 5 different models, but I will especially be focusing on Kirkpatrick's model, which when you do research in this field really comes out as the milestone for evaluating capacity development interventions. This model has been elaborated based on work by Kirkpatrick that was done in the 1950s. And as I mentioned, this was initially developed within the framework of industrial development. When we look at this model, we have the opportunity to analyze capacity development interventions looking at 4 different levels, which are the level of reaction, learning, behavior, and results. The first level, which is that of reaction, simply allows us to engage training participants and see whether they have enjoyed the training and if they're satisfied with what they've learned. In order to do this, some of the methods that are used are interviews or focus group discussions or questionnaires right after the end of the training. The second level is the level of learning and looks specifically at whether participants have learned what has been expected, what was taught to them, and how well they have learned it. Methods to assess this are, for example, the comparison of pre-training and post-training questionnaires, and also the use of a control group who has not undertaken the training. At the third level, we instead focus on looking at the behavioral change that has come from participating in capacity development intervention. So the assessment of this is done a couple of months after the training. Of course, the specificities depend on the theme of the training and where the participants work. As I mentioned, this specifically focuses on organization, so it tries to assess behavioral changes on the workplace. This can be done through direct observation, for example, of how training participants would adapt the knowledge and skills they have learned to the workplace, and allows us to see whether there has been change, whether they specifically apply the skills they have learned, and which ones. At level 4, we instead look at what are the organizational consequences of the training, so whether there was an overall improvement of results at organizational level, and this is mostly intended in terms of productivity, performance, or quality of the work. I'm now gonna briefly go through 4 other methods, especially by drawing similarities and highlighting similarities and differences from the Kirkpatrick's model. As you can see on the top, we also have Kaufman's model, which somewhat elaborates on Kirkpatrick's, but provides us with 5 different levels for evaluating capacity development interventions. The key highlights of differences from Kirkpatrick's are the fact that the first two levels, in Kaufman's model, input and process, actually correspond to level 1 of Kirkpatrick's model, which is reaction. Kaufman differentiates between input and processes, looking in the first instance as what the perception of participants were regarding the training material, whereas while looking at processes, the focus is mainly on the delivery of the program and how this was perceived by participants. Kaufman's level 3 of acquisition combines instead level 2 and level 3 of Kirkpatrick's model, so learning and behavior. It looks at whether there has been a change in knowledge and skills of training participants, and it looks at whether this knowledge and skills have been applied in the workplace. Kaufman's level 4, that of application, slightly differs insofar as it specifically focuses on how well the learned skills and knowledge have been applied to the workplace. As I mentioned, this has 5 levels. So we also have level 5, which looks at societal and broader consequences of the training. What are the broader consequences and results of the trainings? Allen's model is instead a model which can be said to be a little bit more nuanced insofar as it has 8 levels. Some of the key differences from Kirkpatrick's model are the fact that it differentiates analysis that focuses on the cognitive knowledge that has been acquired and on the technical skills. Similarly, when we look at level 5 and level 6, we have a slight difference between individual behavior change as it may be observed externally on the workplace, and level 6, which is the perception of individual behavioral change of the participants themselves. An additional model which very much resonates with Kirkpatrick's is a return on investment analysis that can be run on capacity development intervention, and basically allows us to focus also on the financial aspect of the training. What it does is to provide us with a ratio which relates the results that have come from the training, and these correspond to the results in level 4 of Kirkpatrick's model, which are related to the investments made to ensure the training. When we look instead at Brickenhoff's success case method, this is a method that focuses on identifying participants' performance within the training and understanding how training participants have performed and identifying what the variables and what are the factors that determine this. So it begins by identifying groups of best performers and least performers, and then goes on to run in-depth analysis of these two groups and to really look at what elements have determined this differing performances. Its goal is that of replicating best performances in the future, so adapting the training to ensure most participants perform well, and thus overcoming the limitations that have affected other performances and supporting worse performers to perform better. So this was this brief overview of the theory. I'm now gonna leave the floor to Chuma, who will be telling you a bit more about needs and assets assessment in capacity development interventions, which, as has been highlighted from the poll, really is one of the key issues that affect our capacity to evaluate training.
Thank you, Lou. Indeed, going back to the poll results, a lot of you have, 78% of you have said that one of the difficulties and challenges of capacity development is the lack of baselines. And then other folks also talked about 56% of you identified the absence of needs assessment as a challenge for capacity development. So we thought we would dedicate a couple of slides on that topic. And indeed, in these slides, I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 things. The traditional needs assessment, and then the assets-based assessment, and then a more revolutionary one, which is the gender-responsive asset-based approach to needs assessment. Actually, let us give credit to UNDP. UNDP, the Capacity Development Group of the Bureau for Development Policy, in November 2008, designed a user's guide, and in its section number 2 is entitled "Assess Capacity to Assess Capacity Assets and Needs," and this is really about 10 pages of the entire user's guide. So you can see that we are building on some previous experience. But what I want to bring forward here is something new, something that is a little bit more advanced, because we want also to have a gender-aware, gender-sensitive, gender-responsive asset-based assessment. So generally, what do we have? We have the traditional needs assessment, which is based definitely on half empty approach. It really emphasizes discrepancy, emphasizes external solutions, and it does not really construct on the local or organizational capacities. Next. And indeed, when you see here with the Lou, can you just go to the next slide? Yes, please. Yes, and then we go back to that one. Now, what we see here, the traditional versus asset-based approaches, is that the traditional begins with problems. You know, it identifies gaps, what is missing. And as a result, we're not surprised that it focuses on external solutions. It's the asset-based needs assessment will always begin with identifying, appreciating actually internal assets. And it's not surprising indeed also that the asset-based approach will design solutions with a focus on internal capacities, maybe complemented with some external items or ingredients, but it is more based on appreciation of local capacities. So we consider that the use of an asset-based needs assessment is much preferable as it helps identify what is available or potentially available in a group, organization, instead of just looking at what is missing in that organization or community. So previous slide, please. Now, the gender responsive asset-based approach is more empowering because, you know, the ability to benefit from resources, it consider that it is, when it's sanctioned by law or customs or convention, we consider it as a rights-based access. When it is mediated by political economic privilege, we consider that the type of access is structural. It is socioeconomic. It's a structural mechanism of access. Now, when the most important ingredient is culture and norms, then of course the type of access is more relational. Next, let's see if what we have next. Okay, no, that's about it. So in any case, what we can take out of this general review is that the traditional versus the asset-based. The asset-based is really, it always begins with assets. It is more appreciative, and this will affect your own evaluation of capacity development. I want to acknowledge some of the authors of this type of approach. There is Altschulz James, I will write it in a chat form, bridging the gap between asset capacity building and needs assessment. And there's also a number of people like Ribot, Jean-Claude, a theory of access and rural sociology. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chuma and Lou. Hello again, colleagues. I will now share my presentation, if I manage to, and stop my video. Okay, I hope you can all see it, guys. So, in our storytell, we believe it is important to present you how we got here and why, as well as the assumptions.
Will not yet online. So can you try again sharing your screen?
Yes, sure. Okay. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, and
okay, great,
perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we would like just to present you how we got here and why, as well as the assumptions we based our work upon. Well, risking to stating the obvious, and as came out during Katinka's warm-up session, we can all agree evaluating capacity development poses several challenges. I won't repeat what already said. It is though worth to mention that capacity development does not have standalone outcomes. It supports a diverse set of goals, different sectors, different levels, through different activities. Therefore, establishing causal links between specific capacity development activities and targeted development impacts might be difficult. Also, what has already been said during the warm-up session, it might also be challenging defining long-term outcomes and also understanding who's the ownership of these results. So who actually contributed, whose these results can be attributed to. Implementing traditional monitoring and evaluation models might also not work. as we face the challenge to adopt evaluation methodology on a case-by-case basis. So these and many other challenges drove us to join our efforts in suggesting possible ways to overcome them, starting with the extensive research as Suma and Lou presented. We realized the existence of valuable CD guidelines and frameworks, both internal and external to UN, each of them focusing on a specific challenge, as we have seen, with a specific models, often differing and sometimes even opposed to each other. Another important element that drove our efforts is really acknowledging capacity development as a core function of our work and the need for a coordinated approach. With all this in mind, FAO started working on an evaluation capacity development framework. It was a theoretical effort to put together all the tools that are out there and harmonize them. It was then presented during UNEG 2018, and it caught the attention of quite a few organizations. UNITAR and FAO then proposed the establishment of a UNEG interest group on capacity development, and soon after we started working all together and to a new UNEG capacity development framework that could be widely applied to the UNEG community work. We started then its piloting, and Katinka and I will present the takeaways from the piloting of this framework that we will afterwards launch. So let's see hands-on practice. So here we have 5 evaluations that we analyzed to identifying lessons learned that we used through editing and of the framework. Before presenting the takeaways though, and also making sense out of what worked well, what were the challenges, we will focus on one of them so that we will manage hopefully to respect the time limit and also see in some details the methodology used. As you can see here, almost all these selected evaluations have the policy institutional support component. We understand this is the most challenging aspect and the one on which we believe is worth to open a discussion today, especially if we have some members of the policy group. But let's proceed with order. The case study I will present you today is from a project evaluation recently conducted in Chile. The objective was to develop and implement an integrated monitoring and evaluation system for carbon stocks and biodiversity in forest ecosystems. In this case, the development objective or expected results were not clearly linked to the overall intervention objectives. So the evaluation team had to work on it to clearly identify it, which would be develop capacities in the use and application of the CMF from one side, and on the other side, supporting the institutions to include in their policies the evidence and the information from the CMF in the regulation concerning forest and land use. On the ownership side, we didn't have a lot of confusion here because it was implemented by a national public institute with FAO support and guidance. Okay, so let's see the approaches that we use. First and foremost, the change chain storytelling approach that has been used to identify the contribution of the intervention, first to capacity development outcomes, and then of these capacity development outcomes to sustainable development objectives and transformational change, a different level. Here, we adopted a simple theory of change, well, not very simple, but the theory of change model, but also the outcome harvesting, as we will see, proved to be quite useful in the other evaluations analyzed. Anyhow, in our approach, interconnection among different levels were quite important, as we had a strong focus on change, and we started from the assumption that to see any transformational change, we cannot investigate all the dimensions separately, but transformational change emerges from the close interaction to lead to a virtuous cycle. So for us, it was really important to see how all the activities of the intervention at different levels were interacting. In our change storytell, we started from the assumption that the capacity development outcomes were actually intermediate outcomes contributing to a higher level development objective. And this led us to focus on two main line of analysis, the contribution analysis and the attribution analysis. In the contribution analysis, as you can see, these are very simple approaches that we integrated to one another, and we use many different models and tools to inform them. We will see that. Going back to the contribution analysis, so this entailed the identification of results and changes, why they occurred or not, and most importantly, which was very, very useful, investigating the roles played by the intervention and other internal and external factors. Here, I'm referring to changes on the national level, for example, even the public opinion, to other interventions currently or recently active on the topic. For the attribution analysis, we decided to search for clear attribution linkages only at output level, while outcome level, we focus on national ownership. These are some of the tools that we used to inform the analysis that we took. As Chuma mentioned, the capacity needs assessment is a very important tool, also because it offers a baseline, but often is not available. So we included a few paragraphs in our framework on how it's possible to reconstruct a baseline, or at least a similar exercise that it's not the evaluator job, but it's important for us to understand how needs were identified and whether these are relevant to the needs of targeted beneficiaries. So we offer a checklist in the framework that could be adapted to different cases. Then another important thing is the beneficiaries mapping. And all this was around the agents of change topic. For agents of change, we consider those that, due to their role in a community or organization, have the possibility to trigger or sustain the change. And here there's a trade-off we should all be aware of. Generally, agents of change, so those that really have the possibility to trigger the change, even to transfer knowledge, are those that generally have more access to resources, information, trainings. And this lists out those coming from minorities or disadvantaged groups. So we need to be aware of the trade-off with the inclusion principle. Okay, then we also use the Kaufman model to assess the modality of the delivery modalities of the city intervention, and this was also very useful aspect. Another tool that in our case was very, very useful because we couldn't go mission due to the COVID-19 pandemic was the use of an extensive knowledge, attitude, and practice-based survey. We integrated that with the principles of the Kirkpatrick model that Lou has presented. So we included both experience and perception-based questions. And this allowed us not just to preliminarily identify possible changes that we then triangulated through other analysis, observation and tools, but also to identify proxy of enabling factors and hindering factors on the use of acquired knowledge. Surprisingly, we had a very high response rate. Another very useful tool was the pre and post intervention analysis that was based both on interviews and desk review. As you can see, we use many different models and tools and try to combine them. I'm here trying to be very, very quick. I added more slides, but my colleagues asked me to cut it, and they were right because I'm already going over time with this. Okay, so just quickly going from the other evaluations, what worked well and what were the most common challenges. So we have seen that this change storytell worked well, and there was often an high response rate to this online CAP-based survey. We are always scared to use them for risking, because we know we risk to receive a very low response rate and to waste a lot of work. But we have seen through our case studies that when it comes to capacity development, people are keen to respond. We all experience high level response rate in our surveys, at least when we were able to reach out to the participants and the data that was available. Even in this case, there was no CNA, so as mentioned, we have to rebuild one. Also, was difficult to map the linkages between the capacity development activities at individual level and the policy level. We have to really do a reconstruction work there. Another important aspect, an important challenge that we see across the evaluations analyzed is the absence of a monitoring and follow-up activities to capacity development projects. So what happens is that after the training or even activities at organizational and institutional support, there's no follow-up on that. We don't know what is going on there after the intervention is closed. And this is a big problem when we evaluate, also when we are looking for impact. Then another interesting case was the Colombia cluster, because we had to assess capacity development activities delivered in a context of crisis. So as in other cases, was really not possible to reach all communities and actors involved. Our analysis pathway was quite successful, as we, for the resilience project, we pair it with the livelihoods framework analysis, whereas at the institutional level support, we analyze the improvement in the service provided by the organization in support of land restitution to displaced communities. Going to the other evaluations, as I mentioned before, also the outcome harvesting approach was useful for the change storytell approach. Here, my colleague pre-delivered a change description template to interviewees, so she would make sure to have a participatory approach. Interviewees could identify these three main changes before the interviews, and then during the interviews work with the evaluators to trace back those. And even here we also had an high response level to the CAP-based survey. We see that the challenges are often similar. Another challenge that is linked to the ROI that Lou has presented, that cost-benefit analysis are really, we all aim at running a cost-benefit analysis on a capacity development activity, like value for money. It's really actually very, very difficult to do that, and this is a big challenge. Another thing I want to share with you before closing up was the using first the CAP-based survey to identify possible changes, and then feed the results into a SWOT analysis approach. This is another method that my colleague used to the entire intervention, so that those changes, expected changes or declared changes, were opportunities for strength in the SWOT analysis frame, and this helped really to see the outcomes, the development results as intermediate outcomes in achieving a higher level impact. Now, just going back, sorry, because this is, I think it's would be of interest of some of you. Another difficult aspect we all face is really to assess changes at policy level implementation. Now, it's not that it's not possible to identify results. We can, of course, identify outputs of our intervention. We can preliminarily identify the willingness and the enabling factors at policy level that might lead to the implementation of certain changes at policy level, but they take time. And generally, final evaluations take place 3 months after, or really at the end of a project, of an initiative. So should we leave this analysis for the impact assessment? So for an entirely different exercise, I just leave that for a later discussion. Okay, closing up as well. Overall takeaways, changing the evaluation perspective. So we have seen how capacity development is really important to achieve transformational change. It's an integral part of what we do. So it really does not make any sense to assess capacity development and development activities as they were two different things. So they are not necessarily standalone outcomes. Another important point that is based on the stakeholder ownership of capacity development outcomes. We are all working for country ownership. So that is our aim, and therefore also our evaluations should be designed taking that into consideration. We should renounce to seek attribution of long-term outcomes for capacity development, or even in general to our interventions beyond outputs. But this is really me, maybe overthinking too much, but these outcomes should be owned by the stakeholders. So by default, they cannot be attributed to us. So we should not really waste our time and round up our heads on how to do that, because it's just not possible to do it. At least I never succeeded. Last but not least, the importance of interconnections. This is already mentioned by my colleagues. It's easier to focus on the learning outputs. So you have a training and you assess what people learned. But it's also very important to see whether they used what they learned in a given context. This will automatically lead you to analyze the other levels of capacity development, trying to understand why they could not, why they could, what is changing, and why. This is really the change storytelling approach we are talking about. So even though the activities is only focusing on an individual level, always look at how capacity development and other levels could have been implemented. To ensure the main objective is reached, even though the intervention itself doesn't do it. It's important the evaluators tries to give suggestions on that. Okay, I'm done for the time being. I will have a look soon at your comments in the chat. Thank you for your attention. Please write your questions in the chat. I promise I will get back to you soon. And again, now I will leave the floor to Katinka, but we will both love to hear from your experience also on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lavinia. I hope you can all see my screen now. So I will quickly present to you some examples from UNITAR's experience in evaluating capacity development, some challenges. Some are similar to those that Lavinia has already talked about, or that you selected in the poll when we started the meeting, and some might be additional. And then I will focus on some takeaways for our reflection and discussion. I will try to keep it short so that we still have enough time for discussion and changing experiences, because I see some of you have already shared some very useful experience and also documents in the chat box. So please continue doing so. So just to provide a few examples how, you know, capacity development can take different looks and feels, basically. UNITAR, as the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, obviously has almost everything it is doing linked to capacity development. And I just wanted to show you those examples. Of course, now there's little note to take in advance. We are very small, so even though we only focus on capacity development, they are still quite small in scale overall, all of those initiatives that I'm going to show to you. So you can see now on the screen that our projects, or sometimes they're not project evaluations, but they're also network evaluations, as you can see at the bottom left, or as I will show shortly, there are cluster evaluations. As you can see, the second on the top, where we clustered a number of 6 projects. So there's the variance. It's not only about project evaluations, obviously, and I see ILO, for example, has also done other than project evaluations in the area of capacity development. Now you can see it ranges from the one UN climate change learning partnership that we have been evaluating, to a cluster evaluation of training of trainers, to a more chemicals management specific learning project, to the evaluation of a training network of training centers, to another chemicals related capacity building project, and to another climate change and disaster risk reduction topic. So while we are not only focusing on one thematic area, capacity development is part of all of those. You can continue to see here now peacekeeping training project, World Heritage, nomination training, Afghanistan fellowship projects for civil servants, and then also an evaluation on the level 3 of the Kirkpatrick model that Lou has presented to you earlier, and another chemicals management related evaluation. I will now focus a little bit more on 2 of those, just to give you a little bit more insights on both methods and techniques, and apologies to the methods group, I will throw them now together. But yeah, we all know that they can be seen distinctively. So in the framework of the independent evaluation of the One UN Climate Change Learning Partnership, this is in very brief words, it's a partnership of 36 multilateral organizations. So many of your organizations are actually part of it as well, working to build human capacities in developing and transition countries to plan and implement effective climate change actions, and aims to strengthen climate change learning globally, regionally, and nationally. This evaluation is focused on the last phase, the 2017 to 20 implementation phase, but also, of course, did not ignore the previous phases of the project, because this project is existing for a long time already. What we tried in the framework of the evaluation is to do a very broad stakeholder analysis and consultation, meaning that we did not only consult direct participants, but also organizations such as academia, private sector, and UN organizations, and governments, and also regional organizations that are taking the lead on regional level. And those were consulted by using surveys, focus groups, and interviews, and yeah, all 3. We also focused on different levels. As I mentioned before, the project has a global, regional, national level, and we did the same for the evaluation. So we included, for example, also case studies on each regional level, and we did focus on both individual and institutional dimension, to which Lavinia referred earlier. Regarding the Kirkpatrick model, we focused on level 3 and 4, given that level 1 and 2 were already done by project management. So for those, we consulted the results, and then we went above those levels and looked particularly at application of knowledge and skills, and changes in behavior, and then the results coming from it. We also looked at frequency of application, at factors that were enabling or preventing application, at confidence, and also at attribution questions, to make sure we don't take something for granted. We also applied the most significant change technique in order to better understand from individuals what were the changes that occurred. We also used documentary evidence, such as certification and assessment results that we obtained from project management, and that allowed us to triangulate different sources of data. We were lucky to be able to use large sampling approaches. This is, given the size of UNITA, not always the case, but in this project, just to give you an idea, they celebrated last week the 100,000 certificates of completion, meaning that in terms of number of participations, this is tripled or more. There has been a wide number of participants. So we were able to also have a large sampling strategy. So surveys, for example, to participants were sent out to more than 5,000 participants, which allowed us to collect a lot of the data, which resulted in a lot of quantitative and qualitative analysis. We also used 3 languages for all data collection tools that I mentioned above to be able to include as many groups as possible. But of course, ideally, we would have used even more. And finally, we disaggregated survey results, and not only by gender, but also by other factors, to be able to also look at how different groups responded differently. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this was very in brief, some of the aspects that we considered for this evaluation, but I will also post the link in the chat box so that you can read the entire evaluation report, terms of reference and so on, with typical questions that we ask to evaluate capacity development. The next quick case I wanted to present is focusing on training of trainers. And I'm sure also many of you have actually already come across training of trainers, or when you train, for example, training local training institutions, and there is some replication or some exit strategy involved. So for this, in this specific evaluation, we constructed, I have even to say, a more generic theory of change, which you can see in the right. And again, if it's too small to read now, I will post the link in the chat box shortly. Because we found this not only to be missing or insufficiently created, particularly in those important areas of training of trainers where indeed, I mean, you should have a theory of change for all of them, but I think in TOT more than ever. We also applied surveys, but not in this case. I want to highlight that we did not only survey, of course, the direct participants, but we went also one level further to also consult participants from training by trainers. So basically what happened after the initial training of trainers, and try to not only understand how often those trainers have been training, but how many people they have reached then, to understand basically the second dimension as well. We also undertook interviews with the partner institutions and the employers of those trainers to better understand also the incentive structures that they create and how they select trainers and how they call up on trainers so that they can apply their knowledge and skills, as we understand, and did not only depend on the individual. We also applied Kirkpatrick model level 3 and to some extent level 4 in this evaluation. Finally, this was a cluster evaluation. So we actually looked at 6 projects that all had one thing in common, namely a training of trainers component, and that was implemented during 5 years that we selected, and focused on entirely different thematic areas, really from peace to various other thematic areas and different countries and regions. So the only thing really in common was the TOT element, and it was a bit challenging because we needed to remain general without looking at thematic questions, of course. But on the other hand side, I think it also added value because it allowed to dive deep on TOT. Now, what were the challenges that we encountered overall? So first of all, missing baselines, and I think this is something that came up several times today already, was often found an issue, because afterwards we either had to reconstruct baseline information retrospectively, or in some cases we didn't do that, and we take for granted something which is learning, which should not always be taken for granted. It was sometimes difficult to find consultants who have experience and really focus on evaluating capacity development, because there are maybe many consultants out there who have already evaluated capacity development as part of larger projects, but there are a few who really are expert in it and have really focused on it throughout their career. And too often what we see is that evaluators as well tend to look at participants' reaction and learning alone, while we as evaluators, of course, are much more interested in really everything that follows, mainly how people use it and what are the changes resulting from it and the long-term results. often, and this is what Lavinia said as well, we have our evaluation timeframe ready, and it starts very, very quickly. If it's not even a midterm evaluation, if it's a final evaluation, it starts often very quickly after the intervention ended, and which is often too early to see long-term results and behavior changes and impact, and therefore to be avoided when possible. But yeah, sometimes it is difficult to change the evaluation timeframe. Then we often see missing results frameworks and theories of change, or the most often project management actually think there are theory of change and there are result formulations, but the evaluators quickly understand that they would not qualify them as those. Monitoring and self-evaluation data sometimes is lacking as well, or at least not incomplete. Which is a pity, because of course that also cannot be entirely reconstructed by the evaluation, and it's always good if this is available to also take this into account for the assessment. Theoretic models, as presented earlier by Lou, are very, very useful and for the evaluations. However, sometimes we might feel frustrated because we cannot apply them to our specific cases. For example, I've myself taken a training on the ROI, the return on investment. And at the end of the training, I was so curious to apply the ROI methodology to my own work. But until now, I have not been able to apply it because simply we did not have the data. And we are now getting support from the ROI Institute, and I hope that in the future I will be able to apply it. Connecting individual capacities with a contribution to supporting countries implementing the SDGs. So the question is, often we focus very much on individual capacities and connecting it really to institutional capacities or even higher level changes, and how we support member states in implementing the SDGs is and remains very tricky in some evaluations. And then finally, the scale does not always allow us for robust methodologies, including the comparison, for example, the use of comparison groups or counterfactual, which we have only been using in some cases. So sometimes we do have indeed budget for robust evaluation methodologies, but as I mentioned, we're a very small institute and have to deal with small evaluation budgets as well, and time. So often we unfortunately are limited by this. Now, my last slide, I would just share with you several takeaway messages. So I would like to encourage those of you who are as curious as I am to dare the unknown sometimes. So if you haven't yet reconstructed your baseline, there are various tools available how to do this in the area of capacity development. So try it. And you can also relatively easily assess the most significant change. You can try levels of the Kirkpatrick model that you haven't explored yet, up to the highest level, and if possible, the return on investment. I think, surveys and focus groups have for us always proven to be a great tool to reach out to larger groups. I have been working with people who are very skeptical about surveys, and I know there are of course several limitations to it as well, but there are also advantages, and I recently really had a lot of learning during focus groups as well, where participants continue their learning experience and really send back positive signals to the evaluators. Then again, I think this is a never-ending debate, of course, but be humble about the attribution versus contribution debate in the context of capacity development, because there is and remains always a large portion that, of course, we cannot influence and not attribute possibly unless you have evidence for that. Then workshops on outcome harvesting or outcome evidencing can really help understand the unintended outcomes, which are really common in the area of capacity development. And tomorrow I will participate to one of our outcome harvesting workshops as part of one ongoing evaluation. And I'm already looking forward to that, because I think this is a very useful tool in evaluating capacity development as well. With regards to individual changes and institutional changes, we really have to go away from only focusing on the individual level and try to move to institutional levels. And then we need to provide sufficient time for application of knowledge and skills. So this comes back to the evaluations timing as well and time frame. And then finally, we need to put more effort on understanding the relationships between individual capacities and organizational institutional capacities and create this link. This is it from my side and some experience. As I mentioned, I will post the links in the chat box so that you can read more. And I will now hand back to Lavinia for some final words. And please already be ready for posting questions and comments in the chat box or for asking them by using the mic shortly. Back to you, Lavinia.
Thank you very much, Katinka. We are now reaching the end of our session, and it's therefore time to officially launch our UNEG Evaluation Capacity Development Framework. Now, I only have 3 slides, I swear. We are closing up. So I don't know if you can see the screen. Okay, so I guess you can. Well, as mentioned, this started as an FAO proposal. All capacity development interest group members contributed to the new UNEG capacity development framework. We started with UNITA, WIPO, and UN Women. This year we have many more other members, and we hope to have even more after this EPE, so that we can achieve even more in the next year. The framework presents, as mentioned, a coherent and systematic approach to evaluate capacity development among UN members. For us, this is a living document, meaning that we have already added a few case studies to it, but it would be great for you guys to send us your suggestions and contribution after the circulation. We are now in the process of fine-tuning last elements, and we'll circulate the framework early next week. So the framework is, how does it look like? It has 5 sections: an introduction and rationale, we have already discussed today, key concepts and definition, just to be all on the same page. Then the 3rd section is really about main steps in evaluating capacity development, how to use the framework. So here it's, you will also find information on what is important to know about a capacity needs assessment, should you need to make some efforts in reconstruct the baseline or doing a similar exercise. Then the 4th section is really the core of the framework. You will find here 4 matrices, 1 matrix per each capacity development level, plus their interconnections. You will see they are arranged around evaluation criteria, and this should make easier shopping the framework, adapting and integrating suggested methods and their combination to your own evaluation methodology. And then the last section presents case studies, at the moment only from UNITA and FAO's piloting, but we will add more. Okay, so thank you for letting us share with you our journey so far. We would like to invite you to work with us, starting by sharing your experience today, and also contributing to the UNEG Evaluation Capacity Development Framework. How can you do that? Just by simply sending us your general suggestions, comments, or even we will also circulate a template that you can use to propose your case study, your evaluation, your specific methodology to be added to the framework for the benefit of the entire UNEG community. Last but not least, our group has an open door policy. So should you find yourself looking for an informal platform to discuss possible approaches to integrate capacity development assessment in your own evaluation, please feel free to reach out to us. We can just share on the terms of reference or the methodologies, among other things, even if you are not part of the group. So that would be it from our interest group. Thank you again for your attention, and over to you guys. Katinka, maybe you would like to go with some final remarks while our colleagues wrap up their ideas and contact us through the chat box.
Thank you, Lavinia. Now I would really like to use those last minutes to hear from all of you. So please, also those, so I see some of you were very active in the chat, so please feel free to share if you have any thoughts, any experience you would like to share from ILO, for example, or from UNICEF, or any other organizations. Please.
I have a question, Katinka, if I may.
Yes, Ada, please.
May I? Oh, thank you very, very much. First and foremost, allow me to congratulate all of you. This was really a well-organized, very substantive presentation, and in an area where most of our organizations need still to develop some capacities and some knowledge. So thank you, really, really very good. I have two questions. The first one, I'll try to be as brief as possible. As you know, UNICEF, as many other organizations, have quality assessment systems for evaluation groups to assess the quality of evaluation reports. And we had an experience when we had a country doing an evaluation of capacity development, and we faced the challenge that the tool for quality assessment was not appropriate to assess the quality of the evaluation on capacity development. And mainly it was because that evaluation was using the Kirkpatrick model and was not, in doing so, was not using the evaluation criteria. So I had to struggle a lot to say, well, they do not necessarily need to use it, but I had to struggle a lot in order to get a fair rating for that evaluation. So my question is whether you have experience in embedding the evaluation criteria in evaluations of capacity development, or do you think that is not necessary, does not need to be forced? And my second question is whether you have an example on how evaluations have been used and have led to changes at whatever level. I'm more interested at the institutional level, but whatever level, but an example of use, if you can share with us, would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ada. I can start with the first question, but Lavinia, Chuma, Lou, please feel free to add to this and also the second question. Ada, yeah, what you mentioned is very important. And I had said earlier, I think that, yeah, we applied in all our evaluations the OECD DAC criteria. So indeed, we managed to use the Kirkpatrick model and different levels and formulated evaluation questions in order to use the levels basically. So I do think that you can combine those, and it's not an either or question. On the contrary, they are really working very well together. And what we plan to do is when we share next week with you the framework, is to also indicate how you can best formulate your evaluation questions focusing on capacity development. So that this is easily applicable, because I know we all, when we develop our terms of references, follow the criteria. And I also want to say that, yeah, I think it does not necessarily fall under one criteria only, such as effectiveness. You can really look at all criteria and see how it fits. But I let my colleagues complement and add. So over to you.
Yes. Quite a thought-provoking question by Ada. You know, at first look, I think all of these processes defend. I mean, the criteria used by the Kirkpatrick model and all the other models, all of them at first look, I see them related to the effectiveness criterion. So maybe that report will be complemented if issues of relevance were taken care of although when you look at the use, it goes just beyond the short-term effectiveness. So probably some of the elements of the model are also responding to the durability or how can I say, sustainability question. So definitely I am all for a combination of criteria. We cannot just restrict, we cannot restrict evaluation design, particularly the questions of the evaluation, to the models presented by Lou in this session.
Yes, thank you, Chuma. Absolutely, I agree with Katinka and Chuma as well on that, Ada. And this is why also we, in our framework that we are proposing as a way to overcome some challenges, this is one of them, really the existence of different models that seems different actually in their structure, but that they can be combined and be also organized below the evaluation criteria. In fact, what we did was we decided, at first they were not, but we decided to really arranging the evaluation questions, indicator, and the combination of methods below each evaluation criteria. For example, in my presentation, you might remember I mentioned the Kaufman model. From that we took the aspects of related to the assessment of the delivery modalities of capacity development, and we placed that in our evaluation matrix below efficiency. Then Bo, on your sorry, Ada, on your second question, I'm not sure I got it. So you would like to hear the findings from our case studies on how the project, the intervention did in supporting and contributing to results at policy level. Am I correct?
Yes, how the findings were used to promote change, actually, how successful you were on that.
Okay, so we had two cases I directly worked in, but then I can invite also my other colleagues to from FAO to jump in. The case of Chile, well, in that case, the evaluation actually helped during the process, acknowledging the importance of evidence-based, evidence-informed policies, and also the evaluation itself was useful to increase the knowledge about this work that was done on this CMF platform. At the end, the government itself allocated resources for the continuation of the work on the CMF, and also for the implementation of new policies and regulation at regional level. For land management and also for forest management. This was one case. Another case in Colombia, maybe a bit more respondent to your question, was related to land restitution to displaced population. There the project was really about supporting institutions in delivering further services, in launching and also concluding the long processes needed to restitute lands to displaced populations. In that case, we have seen how the intervention has contributed to that, but here was really important to stress the ownership component and the fact that many other interventions contributed to that very same goal. It was a peace building program that FAO intervention was supporting. So we were able to identify FAO contribution to that finding, to that outcome, but it was not, it was also resting on the government willingness of proceeding with that. So these are two examples I can give you, but I don't want to be the one talking too much today, so I really would like to shut up and listen from your experience, guys. maybe a question we can ask for you, which methods you more successfully managed to use when assessing capacity development. We have seen during Katinka's warm-up session that many of you have already evaluated capacity development. What methods really worked well in your case? Okay, I see contribution analysis. Yes, this was a very useful tool. Kirkpatrick models at lower level. Okay, well, guys, you will have the opportunity to contribute also directly to this discussion, directly to the framework. We are going toward the end and closing up, so I'll leave with Thomas now to launch a very brief survey. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Thank you very much. I will quickly post the link to our SurveyMonkey survey in the chat. We would really appreciate if you would quickly complete the survey. It should only take 2 or 3 minutes. It's only a few questions that would help us a lot. Thank you very much.
Angeline, were you about to speak? Sorry.
No, not really. Sorry, my mic was on. But I just wanted, I was to respond, but I posted my response on the chat. But just wanted to share, I think, my very first evaluation that I ever did. I didn't realize I was using Kirkpatrick's model, but it was mostly a capacity building project for immigration officials department in Ethiopia, where our organization had one did a needs assessment in terms of the capacities of the country to handle irregular migration, and especially for labor migrants going to the Middle East. And then so there was a development of a trainer manual, and then training of trainers, and then cascading trainings to the different regions in Ethiopia. And I think mostly what I did was assessment of level, based on your presentation, level 3 mostly, and a bit of level 4. And I think it links to the other question about whether the other criteria are applied. And I think much as I was looking at the capacity development at intervention itself, but I was also looking at how overall, in terms of looking at the other criteria of relevance and also sustainability, which usually I think is the greatest challenge in terms of sustaining that capacity within institutions over time, especially where there's staff turnover, especially the people you train moving on. So that's kind of the experience that I wanted to share. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Katinka, were you about to reply to one of the questions we received in the chat box?
I just wrote very quickly with regards to evaluating national evaluation capacities. Indeed, we do have one little experience on that. So Genta, I would be very happy to have bilateral talk with you, or of course have some talks as part of the group in the future, because I do think indeed this concerns several of us evaluation officers of course as well. But I'm just aware of time as well. I know many of you have follow-up meetings, so maybe unless Lavinia, there are more questions we should discuss now. I wanted to also thank all of you for participating actively in the chat, for participating to the polls. I wanted to also thank all presenters and all those who helped with technical support and moral support to prepare this session. So thank you very much. Over to you, Lavinia.
Thank you very much, Katinka, and thank you all for attending this session. We hope you enjoyed it, you'll find it informative, and we really hope you can work with us in the future part of our journey. Thank you also to all presenters and for the technical support, as Katinka mentioned. I guess we can close here this session. Please let us know should you wish to join our interest group. Just know that we are also part of the methods group and working with the policy group as well. If from your experience also you have suggestions related to aspects you think our group should keep or should start focuses on for the benefit of the entire UNEG community, please just drop us 2 lines and we will be happy to include that in our work plan. Okay, I'll just leave it there. Thank you again for your attention and have a nice day, you all.